All right, so welcome to our first Nature Network speaker series for the year of 2026. And I'm happy to welcome Melissa Penney to this presentation for everybody. Melissa's yard transformation began in 2019 and has taken many interesting twists and turns along the way. What keeps increasing is the number of bird species that have visited her urban Edmonton yard. Every year is unique, and every day in her yard offers new lessons and insight into the ways of urban wildlife. Melissa will be presenting an overview of what 83 species of birds visited her yard in 2025, some special wildlife encounters she had, and what changes she has made to her wildlife habitat this year to keep it meeting the needs of urban wildlife. So, for that, thank you again for your time tonight, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to have a captive audience to talk about my yard because I think my family might be starting to get tired of me rehashing some of the some of these stories over and over again from this past year. Some of you might have seen some of my presentations before. I haven't done a year in review in a couple of years, so this is always a great exercise for me because the years blend together and some time goes by and all of a sudden I'm trying to remember if something's happened one year or another year. So this is a great exercise for me. But I always kind of like to start out where I started because some of you may never have seen any of my stuff before. So this is my yard in 2013. I always say I'm quite surprised I have this photo. I think the reason I have this photo is because we had the spruces trimmed up and we'd put rock underneath. And at this point, we considered ourselves landscape architects. And so we were quite proud of putting rocks underneath the tree. And as you can see by the children's toys, this was a large fenced playground for my three children, and it was a great place just as it was like this for many years. But then in 2019, things were busy. I wanted to spend more time. Well, I had less time because the three kids, now we've got like extracurricular in the mix and they're getting older. And, I think my youngest, at the time of this photo, my youngest would have been 3 years old. And so it's, busy times, right? And I wanted to spend more time at home and I wanted the birds to come to me. What a lofty idea, and it worked, even though I did basically everything wrong for the first couple of years. And but once I started doing things right, things happened quite quickly. So this is what my yard looked like in June of 2025. You can see it's filled in quite a bit. I didn't start working on it in 2013. I started in 2019, but the connection between birds coming to my yard and the actual habitat, that connection hadn't really been made yet. So I kind of spun my wheels, and I would say that most of this habitat building really was between, like, I would say 2022 to 2025. So when you plant the right plants in the right spot, they do a crazy thing, they grow. So this is one view of my yard. If we get a little bit closer into view, on the right hand side is where I have my ground level bird baths. And as you can see, I really like plants. I have a lot of plants. And this is the path that I take up to my deck. And so we built this gigantic deck that was basically, an exterior stage size. And it's ground level, so it's not high. But we built this before I was a gardener, and now I know that the best soil and sun in my entire yard is underneath that deck. So when it meets its natural demise, we'll be doing some things, but for now, I have a lot of containers. This view is taken from where I sit. So if you ever want to picture me birding in my yard, this is my view. And I have a pretty good vantage point. I can see quite a few things, not everything. The trickiest part of my yard is that I can't see the very tops of trees, especially there's some species, that's their favorite place to go. And I'm usually alerted that they're there by their sound. So this is what my yard looked like in 2025. So a lot of work was done, and a lot of mistakes have been made. A lot of things have been redone, and it's our favorite place in the world. And we spend a lot of time back here as a family. And so, kind of the way I've set up this presentation is somewhat chronological. So I thought we'd start to kind of where we are in 2026 right now in January. I thought we'd kind of start there. And so in 2025, I'm doing the same things that I generally do in January and February. I'm planting seeds, zone hardy, mostly native perennials, and I plant them outside in bins. It's called the winter sowing method. I clean up under places where there's bird feeders, especially when we have warm weather like we did last week and there's a bunch of thaw. I use that opportunity to clean a little bit. I start seeds indoors. One crazy thing that I did is you saw those annuals in the other picture. I decided I was going to try in the fall to propagate. And so I took all these cuttings of these different annuals and I took a lot of them because I assumed that most of them would die. To my horror and excitement, they basically all lived. And so it wasn't time yet that they could go outside, and I was ready to throw them all in the garbage because I was literally in this office surrounded by plants. Like you couldn't even really move. But yeah. It's a thing, propagating annuals by cuttings. It was pretty fun. And so this year I did like quite a bit less. I learned my lesson. Another thing that I started last year after the idea percolating in my brain for a couple of years is I started writing my book. And so that was how I spent a lot of my winter days, whether they were cold or not. I also go into a little bit of a hibernation in January and February. I spend I spend almost all day, every day outside when I can. And so I use those months to kind of reset and get excited about it again. I'm a lifelong tennis player and running around on concrete, and then now deciding as a senior tennis player that I'm going to carry a long lens around. I've absolutely ruined my neck and shoulder. And so I take a little break from bird photography as well, just so that I can heal and be ready for spring migration. And so this time of year when I'm looking outside, these are my locals. So I pretty much anytime I look out the window, I'm going to see red-breasted nuthatches, black-capped chickadees, blue jays, northern flickers, downy woodpecker, white-breasted nuthatches, and house finches. I'm also going to see black-billed magpies, the invasive house sparrow, and common ravens. But everything in this slideshow, except for that old yard photo, everything, all of these pictures were taken in 2025. And so I have tens of thousands of photos of birds in my yard, and I'm at the point where, for if it's a magpie or a house sparrow or a raven, unless they're doing something pretty cool, I'm not taking their picture because of course every picture I take has to be uploaded and edited and sorted and filed away. And sometimes I'm just like, I have enough of them. And then I go to get ready for a talk like this and I realize I really should have taken their picture. So they just didn't do anything super cool in front of me. They're always doing cool things, but not in front of me this year. So no photos of them right now. And then I have birds, that are coming in. We've got like some winter migrants, like red poles, who love to eat the birch catkins. And on my weeping birch, also, they love eating my elm seeds. And so I always have red poles coming in and out. Higher numbers, lower numbers. It's always going to vary each year. Dark-eyed juncos, golden crown kinglet. If I've got a good cone crop on my spruces, I will have white-winged crossbills. Usually the alert for that is that I'll be outside and I'll see little debris falling from the sky, and I'll look way up to a spruce and realize that the crossbills have arrived. I have a love-hate relationship with that little hoot that you see on there because pretty much every time I spend at least 20 minutes outside, I get hooted at. So I will get a single toot, and I know that there is a saw-whet owl somewhere nearby. Um, the only reason I know it was them is because that's how I found one years ago in my yard, is because I followed that noise and there it was. It's really frustrating that you can go a whole year with just being hooted at and then never see the owl. I almost feel like it's playing a game with me. Just like I feel like when I'm walking through a forest that I'm like, oh, where are all the birds? And that, if someone was drawing a cartoon, they'd all be in the trees looking at me. I had great horned owls, quite a few visits, two different owls, and that did cause me a little bit of grief later in the season that we will get to. Big surprise in February is I had 6 robins come by for a bath. And I get robins like at a fairly regular time in the spring, kind of when everyone else is. They do tend to stay pretty late in the season for me, and I get quite a few robins. I mean, one time in the neighbor's mountain tree that goes over my fence, I counted 16 robins in that tree one day. So I get quite a few robins, but I've never had them in the winter before. I know that there's some, in the river valley where there's open water and resources, but as far as like coming to my yard, never had that happen before. So that was a pretty big treat in February. Then we get to the surprises. So I've had cameras in my yard since 2019. The number has grown, the coverage has grown, and in all that time, I've never seen this. And as far as I could tell from my neighbors, they've never seen them in our neighborhood before either. So I started seeing striped skunks. Now, people might who have had a stinky encounter are probably like, "Oh, you don't want skunks." But this is the thing. Skunks are like the best thing to have around. They eat wasp nests, they eat rodents, they eat roadkill, they eat the nasty grubs that will, like, ruin your lawn and garden. They are just magical creatures, and we just really have to find a way to live with them. And so this was in February that I started seeing them. And outside of the yard, and I wasn't sure how I felt yet about if they could get to the backyard yet, but they did. And I named the one that did Pretzel. Um, and that was because she kept coming to the bird bath and drinking, and I figured she was eating too many salty snacks. So in March, it's basically nesting season, even though January and February, my target nesting birds are already checking out cavities boxes around my yard. Things heat up pretty soon, and you have to think about it like they can't just start looking when they are ready to nest. They need to know like who else is here. If you've got red-breasted nuthatches, they're not going to have another red-breasted nuthatches nest like closer than 300 feet from each other. So they have to kind of figure out like who's dominant, who gets to stay, who gets pushed a little farther away. All of this stuff has to happen before they actually start like doing like cavity excavation, right? So it's funny, I'm looking at this, and 3 out of 5 of these photos were taken from inside the house through the window because I was still in hibernation a little bit. But northern flicker, downy woodpecker, black-capped chickadee, red-breasted nuthatch, and white-breasted nuthatch, those are my target nesting species. And the black-capped chickadees have only beaten the red-breasted nuthatches one time to nest in my yard. The white-breasted nuthatches have never nested in my yard, but I know that at least once they were just a few houses away. In 2024, I had downy woodpeckers who excavated a nest snag in my yard, and that was the first time they'd ever nested. And I had northern flickers in a box in 2023 and 2024. So now we're in 2025, and I'm really curious like what's going to happen this year, because it really tugs at my heartstrings. It's like watching Days of Our Lives sometimes. There's like cliffhangers. So when the downy woodpeckers excavated a snag, it was a different snag, and it was pretty hard. So it took the downy woodpeckers just over a month to excavate their nest cavity. So when they were finished and moved on, unfortunately, some house sparrows started to really get interested in it. And at that time of year, there was already juvenile house sparrows around, so I couldn't put up my sparrow deterrents because I didn't want the juveniles to be desensitized to it. So I ended up taking the whole snag and flipping it upside down so that the hole was down near the ground. And then I figured if there was a late nesting species that was cavity nesting, they can make their own hole. House sparrows can't. And so I tried to do a lot of reading, and there's a lot less known about cavity nesting birds than there is about birds that build a nest in a tree because it's so much harder to observe. So from what I could gather, it didn't seem like they usually reused their nest cavity from the year before. I don't know if that's because like I do know that like they like it really humid in there, so I don't know if there's just like too much stink for them to want to use it again the next year or what it exactly was. And also that snag was quite hard, so I decided to bring in another one. And so I brought that one in, and they took to it right away. And you could see that they like in March they were making really good progress on this snag. Um, but I thought it was a sure thing. And then this is like the biggest mistake. Whenever you think something's a sure thing, it most definitely is not a sure thing anymore. But we'll get to more of that as we progress through the season. So spring has started. We've got some more migrants coming in. The crows have very much let me know that they've arrived. Same with the merlins. We typically had merlins like every year in our neighborhood nesting, but this in 2024 it kind of shifted to sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks, which I really hadn't had much of before, and so that was kind of an interesting thing. So the merlin was back, but it did get pushed out again by sharp-shinned and Cooper. So even though like merlins were kind of around, not super close by. And so now we're in March. There's water thawed, there's the sound of water in my yard, there's more birds arriving, and now finally I am out of hibernation and I'm absolutely chewing on at the bit to try and get something done, some sort of project. And I always saw this section of my yard, and it was kind of an eyesore. Like there was so much going on everywhere else. But the problem with this spot was that there's a mature elm, a mature spruce, a Manitoba maple that's quite large, and they're all kind of together. So this ground has a lot of roots. It is hard packed. It's dry as a bone, and like not even grass grows there. Like not even weeds grow there. So it's really I didn't really know what I wanted to do with this spot, but I knew something had to be done because I was just so sick of looking at this kind of like junky area. So it's March. You can see far off in the background, there's still snow. This was most definitely still frozen underneath. I most definitely was out there with kettles of boiling water, melting some ice so that I could level the ground and chipping it away like a complete madwoman. This is how I operate. When I get an idea, it needs to be done immediately. Everything in life gets put on hold. I do not eat. I do not sleep. I need to get this done. So sometimes that serves me well. Sometimes it does not. In this case, I got it done very quickly, and I was super excited because, I what I pictured it as was not like a bird bathing spot, that kind of thing. It's quite shady, so I wanted it to be more like an aquatic garden. So and kind of like a marsh. So I named it Marsha, of course. And so Marsha and I were getting to know each other. We were kind of setting up some different ways that I was going to be able to get these plants in it. I wanted a lot of cattails, but I didn't want them to like overtake my view. So you can see that I've got like some containers with like gravel and, aquatic potting media in it. And then of course, like all of my dead wood, which I just love. And so I was so excited. I finished this. I was so happy. It is still March. 2 days later, my yard looked like this. So even though it was finished, I still had a ways to wait before I could obviously put any plants in it or, see any birds, hanging around it or really enjoy it myself. But it was crossed off my list, and it was one less thing to do when I could be watching birds in the spring, right? And so by May, though, this is what it looked like. It grew in really nicely. The water quality was excellent. I didn't set it up like a bird like bathing spot because, of course, that does make your water dirty a lot faster. And so, yeah, my like little marsh aquatic garden, I tried some different plants in here. And yeah, it was just a really interesting exercise. And I'm so glad I did it because really like it was a spot in my yard that I just hated looking at. And now it just kind of it's like kind of on everyone else's team with us. We're team habitat. So I was it was a good project. April rolls around. We get some more birds coming in. I start seeing ruby crowned kinglets and bohemian waxwings. Sorry for my seal cough. Cooper's hawk was extremely rude. And instead of taking a beautiful splashy bath in the pond, this is actually a dirty puddle in my alley that I was like leaning over the fence, taking photos of it. And I was like, excuse me, there's like a gorgeous pond that was like literally built for you just over here. But no, it wanted the dirty dirty alley puddle, but birds will be birds. Western tanagers arrived and brown creepers. Finally, I usually have a lot more brown creepers, and 2025 had been a little dry so far for them. But then we get to May, and it's literally the month that I wait all winter for. Everything is just coming in like gangbusters. And the thing about spring is that everyone is in a really big hurry to get to their nesting grounds. So I know that if I'm not out there all the time, I'm probably going to miss it. So I kind of like really strategically schedule myself so that I can be out there as much as possible. Because, yeah, sure, there's, cameras on the bird bath. Like, this one is just a screenshot from the camera of the gray cheek thrush. I have pictures of gray cheek thrush in my yard, but I didn't get it in 2025. And I like to see them myself, so that's always my goal. So when we get to May, I'm seeing yellow belly sapsucker, Swainson's gray cheeked, and hermit thrush. I'm seeing cedar waxwings, Philadelphia red-eyed, and warbling vireo. Purple finch, pine siskin, rose-breasted grosbeak, and least flycatchers, which I like to call my little Chebec monsters because they're very vocal in my yard. And so up in the top right is a brown-headed cowbird, which might not seem very exciting, but the 2 years before, I'd only heard it and didn't get a photo. And then even though this is clearly not my favorite photo of the year, I finally got a photo of this brown-headed cowbird. And their sounds are so distinct that, like they make it known when they're there. And even though I had a photo from that visit, there had been a couple other ones where I was just hearing it and I thought it was going to happen again, that I was going to go, a whole season without getting a photo. Baltimore Oriole, it took a very brief, unexciting bath at the pond. Kind of just stood there a little bit, didn't really bathe actually. And so I didn't bother to put the video in, and I'll just cross my fingers that next year I'll get a photo. All the sparrows start coming in, and I get a lot of sparrows. My yard is very sparrow friendly. There's a lot of shrubbery for them to skulk in, a lot of insects on the ground. They're happy campers in my yard. So the chipping and white crowned, songs in Lincoln, white throated, and clay color are all very regular in my yard, and I see a lot of them. And I'm not sure what it is, but especially Lincolns. Like I get so many Lincoln sparrows, and they do have such a pretty song. And after the sparrows start coming through, now we've got the warblers. And so, the warblers, it's like, I hate to like choose one bird over another, but I'm going to be honest that like, I do get more excited when the warblers show up than when the sparrows show up. I know, spoiled, brat, terrible, but I'm being honest with you. So when the warblers start showing up, I get really, really excited. So we've got yellow rumped. I had a ton of northern water thrush this year. Ovenbird, magnolia warbler, blackpoll warbler, Tennessean mourning warbler, Wilson's and common yellowthroat, and yellow warbler. So I do get a lot of warblers. And, a big thing for warblers is they love water and they love insects. So I've spent a lot of time making sure that my plants are native plants attracting beneficial insects because I love warblers so much. A real treat was this black-throated green came through. I hadn't had one. Oh, shoot, I was going to check. I think I hadn't had one for 2 years. And typically that was going to be in the fall for those sightings. So having a breeding male come through was just kind of like an extra treat. And also to be outside when it arrived was even better. So I was super excited to see that black-throated green. I've got black and white warblers, orange crowned, and then what I prefer to call uncommon grackle because it was the first time it had ever come to my yard. So it drives me nuts when things are named common because I swear those are the things that I see the least of. So I'm just going to call it an uncommon grackle. And so for me, that was species 109 for my yard. So just a little bit about the way I count. I don't count it like birding. So if I like just like a flyover, like sandhill cranes, white pelicans, greater white-fronted geese, those aren't on my list. If those kinds of things were on my list, I'd have another 30 birds on my list because like there's a lot of things flying over. The whole point for my yard is to create something that the birds want. So I count the birds that clearly came to me for a reason. Sometimes I do only hear them because they're up high or hidden, and I don't get to see them. I just hear them, but they came to my yard because of what I was offering. So that's how I count my birds. So uncommon grackle, number 109. I'd been hearing red-winged blackbirds that had just started about 3 years before, like, yeah, about 3 years ago. And I do have, I've gotten pictures twice. And I did get a picture in 2024, but not in 2025. I didn't even get a video from a bird bath. So maybe 2026, I'll get some more red-winged blackbird photos. You never know. You just have to kind of wait and see. But by the end of May, I was at 59 species for the year. So you can see why I look forward to May. It's a very exciting time. And part of that really exciting time for me is waiting for the arrival of hummingbirds. And my yard historically has not been a spring hummingbird yard. My spring hummingbird sightings are rare, so brief. Blink and you'll miss it. And so I went out one morning and I was, because they prefer my flowers over feeders. And so to see them, I really have to be out there. Even, in 2025, a hummingbird didn't use my feeder one time that I saw, and I even have a camera on it. So they really do prefer my plants. And so I have to be out there. So I went out early one morning and hoping for a hummingbird. And this is not a hummingbird. This is a brown thrasher. The last time I had seen a brown thrasher was in Dinosaur Provincial Park, which is much more normal habitat for them. I did a clipping from an eBird sightings map, and you can see that for Edmonton, in the 70s, it seemed like a part of the river valley had some consistent sightings over a period of 6 years, 7 years, that they had seen some sightings there. All the same person, like he knew where to go, right? I gotta talk to this guy. I wonder if he's still birding in the Edmonton area. And so it's they came, right? But not for a long time until 2010. You can see down at the bottom, someone in the south side of Edmonton had a sighting. So this was the first time since then that one had been spotted in the Edmonton city limits. So that was really exciting. And unfortunately, because it's May, because it's May, everyone is also coming out of hibernation. So that day there was like every yard project you can imagine was happening around me, and we've got leaf blowers, lawn mowers, banging, sawing, like everything. And so it did not stay super long, and then it was gone. And so I'm just so glad that I got to see it. And this came slightly before that uncommon grackle, and so this was species 108. The water is flowing in May. This is when things like kind of start to look how I remember them from the year before. So it's always such a downer that you like come off this high of like summer and fall and flowers and birds, and then you go in the winter and you're ready to start and you're like, everything's brown. And so that can kind of be a bit of a downer. So once we get to May and, there's things that are starting to flower, the plants are coming up out of the ground. This is when it starts to kind of feel like something's happening. So I've got a container pond off the deck that I'd built in the fall of 2024. And then a picture of my pond, we built that in 2023. So just because, May is finished, there's still stuff coming through in June. And the reason I've kind of done this chronologically is to give you an idea of like what you could be seeing at different times of year coming through your yard. Some birds do arrive later than others, like Canada warbler. They stay the shortest out of any of them. They arrive late and leave early. And since the first time I'd been counting, 2024, I did not see a Canada warbler. And whenever I've seen a bird every year and then I don't, um, I can find a million reasons to be anxious about birds. But I get quite anxious because then I somehow convince myself that it's never coming back again, ever. So I was very happy to see this Canada warbler in June. Another June arrival that's, more common for me to see later is Nashville warbler. I did have a yellow-bellied flycatcher, which is always a treat because they're quite uncommon, and western wood pewee, and my fourth Alberta. So every year I kind of have like, I guess, like my little pockets of goals, and I can't really call them goals because I can't really control if they come or not. So it's like if they don't come, it's not like, oh, I've failed. But I do like to kind of make a little tick mark that yes, I did get all four vireos come through my yard each year. I like to kind of like square that off. And now, besides like the pre-nesting, now we're in the real nesting. And oh my goodness, these downy woodpeckers that I thought were this sure thing. They're still excavating that log. They're mating in front of me all day, every day. And the thing about woodpeckers is they mate very close to their nesting cavity. So it's May, but the cavity's not finished and they're mating all the time. And so then it started kind of being like, oh, they were, oh, something froze. There we go. So then I'm seeing them excavate, but now instead of like all the time, it's like a little bit and then they leave. And then the next day they might not come back, but then they were still mating. And then the next day they'd be working on the cavity again. And so it was really confusing. And then what I did find out later, when I did realize like it was not happening, they did end up nesting in a dead tree in a neighbor's yard. So they were close by, which I guess does explain why they were still mating there. But that also, like from the literature I read, that still seems kind of far away from their nest site for the nesting. But whatever, it is what it is. And so I was just glad that they did have a successful nest at my neighbor's. And the reason that I think that they left that snag was I had talked about those great horned owls coming. And so when an owl visits your yard, um, like the little birds, like they're not going to care that much unless it's a saw-whet owl. If it's like a big owl, they kind of leave it to the bigger birds. So when a great horned owl comes through, you can expect that every magpie, crow, and blue jay in your entire neighborhood is going to be in your yard squawking. And so these great horned owls kept landing in low down in the elm that was kind of over top of that snag. And so there was just like, I think, way too much commotion, way too many days in a row. Like they were making progress. Owl would show up. All those other birds would show up. And I think that that's what made them decide to go somewhere else. These are the things that happen. And so you just kind of like make your plans the best you can and cross your fingers. Same with the black cap chickadees. They were in my yard. I like to call this one buttless. And so this one had a really late molt of its tail feathers. And chickadees have very long tails, so they look especially cartoonish and cute when they have none. But it was happily collecting moss for its nest. I have no idea where they nested. And I didn't really see juvenile or like, like fresh from the nest chickadees. So I don't know if they were successful or if I just somehow missed it. But in the winter, like the early winter of 2025 up until now, I have more black-capped chickadees now than I've had in years. So, it ebbs and flows and it changes, and we'll see what happens. So, May at this point, I know that the flickers aren't happening. I know they went and like that was totally my fault. I had moved their nest log like way too late in the season, and I should have thought of that. I should have known, and so they went somewhere else. So I don't have flickers. I don't have downy woodpeckers. I don't have black-capped chickadees. The robins have already had a failed attempt. And then my red-breasted nuthatches, who nest in boxes on cameras every single year, decided for the first time to excavate in one of the snags that I put up. Now, this was a very cool experience. I mean, I love to see the stuff on camera, but also I've had many years of seeing them on camera. So instead, seeing them excavate this cavity themselves and the whole process of it, they're not skittish birds. So they actually did this right by the door of our garage. So every time we went to the garage, we were like, hey, nuthatches, and we could really see like the progress and what was happening for them and like what stage they were at. And so I did have red-breasted nuthatches. But then we have the migrant nesters. Every year I have house wrens. And remember that nest log that the downy woodpeckers had taken over a month to excavate, and then I flipped it upside down. I had ended up flipping it back right side up for this nesting season, and the house wrens loved it, and they had at least 3 come out of here. This is the tricky part when they're in when they're inside the cavity, because like you can see so many faces, but you can't see every face sticking out that's in there. And when I catch them leaving the nest, I always have to ask myself, well, how many left before I got here? So having a really accurate count of what comes out of there is really difficult, but it was at least three. And so that was a really nice process because it was like, again, so accessible right there in the middle of our yard. We could see them all the time, and just so interesting to see how it all came together. After some disappointing attempts, the Robins decided that they were basketball players, and they built this nest. And I was watching them start, and the material just kept falling through. And I was like, Robins, you're kind of dumb. And but it just started sticking. And before we knew it, there was a nest. And they had three come out of there, and it was a successful nest, totally undetected by magpies and blue jays, who actually kind of fly past there fairly often. So I'm really curious to see if they're going to, like, if the same ones come back, if they go right to the basketball, like, does that mean that they were the same ones? I don't know. That would be pretty cool. But again, I guess we have to wait and see. So typically when I'm doing gardening talks, I spend like the amount of time I have tonight just talking about the plants. So it's, I could talk for days about the stuff that I've planted, the stuff that I've tried that's worked, that hasn't worked. And this was quite exciting for me because sometimes, not always, but when you plant native plants, especially if you plant them from seed or from they're very young, you have to sorry, you have to wait sometimes 3 years for them to flower. So this year was the first time, and up here's a picture of it. My Alberta native hollyhock bloomed for me for the first time. My native blue clematis, my native twining honeysuckle, my native purple prairie clover. These were all plants that were blooming for the first time in my yard, and it was super, super exciting. And now for the crazy story. This is at the point in June where I realized that not one of my mountain ashes or the ones around me have bloomed. And a fruit bearing tree that doesn't bloom does not bear fruit. And so I'm already kind of in panic mode because, like, I rely heavily on that production for fall, to pull things in like more robins, western tanagers, like gray cheek thrush, fox sparrows, the varied thrush the year before had been eating a ton. So, these berries were really important for my habitat. And I did have one younger tree that already seemed like it was like on an every second year flowering fruiting schedule, but I'd planted a bunch of new ones, and I just assumed that they were going to flower, and they didn't. And then the really big one that was along my fence that belongs to my neighbors, it had flowered and fruited every year as long as we have been here. It's a big, beautiful tree. It didn't flower or fruit. And so that was kind of crazy. This was not something that I had taken into consideration that this could happen. Unfortunately, later in the season, I had had some trimming work done for a Manitoba maple, and a branch from their tree, their mountain ash, was kind of like resting on mine. It turned out that my tree was kind of holding up their tree, and it was actually quite dead on part of it. So they did end up removing that entire tree. So now I know that I'm never going to have that berry production. So I did plant some more things in the fall, just so I can see. And if, we get to this point next year and for some reason my mountain ashes aren't flowering or fruiting, then I'm going to replace them. Too hard on the heart to see that happen. Like I said, I mean, I can find anxiety about birds, about plants, like you name it, I can find a way to be anxious about it. So here is Pretzel and her babies. So Pretzel started living under the deck. And we did not have a dog at the time, so I was pretty okay with it. She would come out sometimes when I was in the yard, and I would say, "Oh no, no, Pretzel, you got to go back under there." And then she would. And then at some point, she was nesting though because she took so much of my native grasses, who were kind of just starting to really hold their own. And like I just could see these. I had cameras and I would see her just ripping up my Rocky Mountain fescue, and I'm like, no, not the fescue. And but strangely enough, came back better than ever. And so whatever she was doing to it absolutely helped its growth. She took out a lot of the dead stuff too. And then at some point, she moved to my neighbor's shed that was in the alley. So this picture, I'm actually sitting on the ground in the alley, hoping a car doesn't come by, and just observing her and her babies. And it was pretty awesome. So, we did see them for the rest of the season. Unfortunately, people really do have mixed emotions about skunks. And I did see a few pest removal trucks leave my neighborhood, and as they drove by, had quite the odor coming out of them. So I don't know. After that and later into the season, I did see skunks here and there. No idea what's going to happen this spring or if we're going to have the same amount. And, talking to other people, like it was just the craziest skunk here in Edmonton. So I even talked to people that live like close to the river valley, and, they had said that they hadn't seen skunks in their neighborhood in 20 years. A good friend of mine, she had some nesting under her patio. It was really the year of the skunk. So I'd love to know what changed. Like, because if we are using 20 years as a marker, what was different this year that allowed there to be so many of them? Was it because there was like lots of rodents? Like what were the conditions that gave them like a banner year? So I would love to know the answer to that question. If anyone knows the answer to that question, you pop it down in the chat because I really do want to know. So I did have some nesting experiences that kind of made up for my not super stellar bird nesting year. And this is Mama Fly. So I've had northern flying squirrels who are highly nocturnal come to my yard since 2019. I did not know they existed. We went away on a trip and I popped a camera on a feeder. And while we were away, I woke up to all these notifications and I said, well, why is the red squirrel eating all night? And that's when I just discovered that we actually had nocturnal flying squirrels, that have the big patagium that stretches from their wrist to their ankle, and they look like a big flying handkerchief. And so I've had them coming to my yard basically every single night since I saw them for the first time, and they're really friendly. They're not very skittish. Um, but they're highly nocturnal. But all of a sudden, I started seeing this one during the day a lot. And the more I observed her, the more I realized that she was very large and very round. And I assumed that she was pregnant. And so she was so round that she was kind of struggling to, like, her mobility was impacted. So kind of slow and lumbering, and to the point like I could take like a shelled walnut and just like put it in front of her and she would then pick it up and eat it. We'd had quite a wet spring, so we had like a lot of mushrooms, and northern flying squirrels love two things, especially moths and mushrooms. So she ate a ton of mushrooms in my yard. And when it was this little photo session I was having with her, she was eating mushrooms, and a red squirrel came and punched her in the face. And then she played dead, and then the red squirrel left, and I'm just watching in shock. I mean, I only got like the last 2 seconds of the video because it just took me like by surprise. And once the red squirrel left, she just got up and kept eating her mushrooms. And so this was actually quite like a pivotal moment because a few years before, I had a flying squirrel box up. And during the day, one was sleeping in it, and a red squirrel went in and beat it up, and it played dead. But now I didn't know that flying squirrels play dead. I don't know if people who study flying squirrels know this because I can't find anything about it, and I've seen them do it twice now. And so this red squirrel goes into the box during the day, beats up the northern flying squirrel. Northern flying squirrel's lying there like it's dead. I am absolutely beside myself that I have brought this terror down on my sweet northern flying squirrels. And and then the northern flying squirrel left the box. And then I'm just beside myself. I got up on a ladder. I took the box down and I was like, I'm never doing this again. I can't interfere. This is so horrible. And then about 20 minutes later, that flying squirrel came back and was like, where's my house? And then I felt even worse. And then I'm like, no, I'm interfering. So then I'm like, I can't do this. So I put it away. And then in 2024, I tried to pop it back up again. I realized I put it in the wrong spot, and they were like no interest in it whatsoever. And then so I took it back down. And then I was thinking, oh, you know what? Like that's fine because I can't handle the drama. And so then seeing that she like really didn't care about being punched by the red squirrel and that she just went about her business after, it made me realize that like the red squirrel's not going to kill her and eat her. Like that's not going to happen. And if she had managed to be pregnant, and her mobility was so compromised that I'm pretty sure she was nesting actually under a storage box by the garage. And so the last time I saw her pregnant was I have a camera on the flying squirrel feeder, and I put some nuts on it after dark so that the birds don't come and eat it, or the red squirrels. But I put that up and I could just see her get to like the little top of the tray, and I could see her little face, and she couldn't quite make it up there. And then all of a sudden I saw her let go, and then all I could hear was this thump in the background, and I was sure she had died. Um, and then nothing happened for a couple weeks. We didn't see her. And then two baby flying squirrels started coming to the feeder. And then a little while after that, she must have had some sort of injury to her tail. There was quite a notch out of it. I did see her after. So they all lived. And so after all of this, when it started to get cold again, I thought, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do this. If she was going to nest under that storage shed, if she's got more babies in the yard now, which means the population has gone up, I'm going to put this box up again. And it's a custom northern flying squirrel box that's built to their, well, what the internet says, their specifications. So every day, and still as of today, I usually have three northern flying squirrels cuddling in the box. They don't hibernate, they don't go into torpor. When they're cold, they snuggle, and they're absolutely adorable. My best guess is that this is the mama fly and her two kids, and then just by the behavior, like there's two that are always kind of like rough, tumbling, rolling around with each other, and one that very much doesn't. And then while there's three in there, I sometimes then have a fourth around. So I know that, like, at the very least, because I mean, when I say four, it's because I can see one at the feeder when there's three in the box. But when it comes multiple times to the feeder, I have no way of knowing if that's the same squirrel or not. They need like little name tags or something. But alive and well, the box finally worked out. So I put up a second one, and we'll see what happens. Tune in next year for 2026. Finally, I'm right pretty much on schedule. My ruby-throated hummingbirds arrived, and yeah, I clear my schedule to stare at hummingbirds as long as I possibly can all day. So typically they arrive in July, and then I've got kind of hummingbirds every day for a month. So this year, it wasn't my worst year. It wasn't my best year. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. I'll take what I can get. I mean, they're hummingbirds. They're amazing. Um, yeah, I've got a lot of pictures of hummingbirds. And then finally, my hooter showed up and had a bath at the pond. And so, this kind of happens every year that I'm going to have a northern saw-whet owl at the bird bath or at the pond. But I still, at this point, did not have a picture yet. So even though things have quite slowed down, there's still a lot going on in my yard. It's just a little different. So when we get to this time of year, when we get to July and August, this is what my view looks like now. It's a lot more filled in. It can be sometimes really hard to spot a bird in there, but I kind of cram in as much as I can on this deck where I can't really garden. And this is like my absolute favorite place to sit. So I used to do this thing, and if I sat on the opposite side of my yard, not on the deck, there's a swing bench, and that's when the light is in the evening behind me. So it makes it much easier. If you're looking for birds, you always want the light behind you. And so this is where I would sit, and I could see a snag in my neighbor's yard that kind of like overhang like the fence, and it was quite tall. And each year I would watch this, which is how western wood pewees hunt. So western wood pewees need dead wood for hunting from. And the way that they hunt is they fly out for the insect. They're aerial insectivores. And you'll know it's a western wood pewee because they basically return to their same spot. So if you see a flycatcher out in the distance and it does exactly that, you can kind of like wager money that that's a western wood pewee. And so I loved watching this. They also need it for singing in the spring for mating. So dead wood is very important to them for those purposes. So this neighbor bought a chainsaw a few years ago, and he loves his chainsaw very much, and he loves to use it. And every time I hear the chainsaw start up, I do get very anxious. And so I went over there one day over the fence and I was like, hey, hey, you can't hear me because the chainsaw is going. And I said, if you ever decide that you're going to take out that snag, like I'll take it. Like I'll take the whole thing as one piece. But just don't like cut it down and get rid of it because I will take it. And he of course thought I was absolutely nuts. And I think this was 3 years ago. And every summer, every summer since, every time I hear the chainsaw, it's me over the fence, that snag. Remember? Okay. And that's kind of our communication is always about this snag. And so this year a very large dumpster showed up in the alley, and that does make me nervous, and the sounds of chainsaws went along with it. He did end up almost taking out every tree in his yard, which was, very hard for me. It's his yard, it's his trees. He has a plan. He'd like to do a garden and stuff. Like, I mean, it's totally his thing. I plant, like, always thinking that that could happen. So I don't, I mean, of course, you rely on what's around you, but you can't rely on too heavily what's around you because you can't control that. And, he said, well, I think I'm going to take that snag out today. And so it took 5 people to carry this snag. And we had to go down the alley, through my garage, under the spruce, around a corner. This thing, the end is over here. So it's over 25 feet long, and I was so happy to have it. So I put it up, and I tried to mimic kind of like the orientation that it had been in his yard, kind of the same idea, like a little bit over the alley. Like I don't know what was good about that, so I thought that that was the safest thing to do, is kind of try and mimic the best I could of how it was. And sure enough, not too long later, my western wood pewee came and landed on it. So, and a lot of other birds. So definitely it was worth the wait. And you try and find that silver lining, because not everything is going to work out exactly how you hope. And sometimes you have to wait a while and cross your fingers. But yes, the western wood pewee did come and land on it. So when the hummingbirds arrive and I'm in hummingbird land and forgetting to take pictures of other birds or to do other things, namely housework, I am also keeping my eye out for other kinds of hummingbirds, because I've had calliope hummingbirds in the past, and I've also had rufous hummingbird. Besides, the ruby throats. We're only supposed to get the ruby throats in Edmonton. So if you look at this little eBird map, that little bloop, that's me. And I'm the only recorded spot in Edmonton that calliopes have ever been. And this little juvenile showed up this year. I didn't have one in 2024. So that was the third year I've had calliopes, which is super exciting. It's always so much more brief than you possibly could hope for, but it's always a treat. And you know what, sometimes like those treats just last for a few minutes. I can't actually remember how long it stayed. I can't remember if it was 2 days. It's all a blur, but it was there, and I got a lot of pictures and videos. And especially when you're dealing with juvenile hummingbirds, you need every single picture, because there are some definitive ID marks, but you need things like tail feathers spread open to show like that rufous color in between and all that kind of stuff. In August, now everyone's on the way back. And so now on the way back, I'm starting to see some things that I haven't seen yet, like bay-breasted and Cape May warbler, palm warbler, American goldfinch. And then this, has anyone seen the Central Park effect? I hadn't heard of it, but Steve from Wildbird General Store was so kind. When he heard that I hadn't heard of it, he lent me his DVD copy. I really, really enjoyed it, so I highly recommend it. In there, they're asking people what their unicorn bird is. And so basically, your unicorn bird is a bird you've never seen and you really, really want to see it. So for me, that is hands down Connecticut warbler. I've had every warbler come to my yard that's supposed to be in Alberta, and other warbler species that aren't supposed to be here. And the only warbler that occurs in Alberta that I hadn't had was Connecticut warbler. A lot of people said that they're not a yard bird and that that wasn't going to happen, and I agreed with them. And then lo and behold, I had a Connecticut warbler show up, and someone out there being like, oh, I don't know if that eye ring's complete. It is complete, believe me. Zoomed in, behavior, everything, full out Connecticut warbler. It's just a little bit worn on one side. This is a juvenile, and so this was species 110. Was it 110? Yes. This is, I all of a sudden thought I made a typo. Species 110. And so don't ever give up hope because I want you to, as a little exercise tonight, think of what is your unicorn bird? Manifest that, think about it, wish for it, because you know what? I swear that makes a difference. And then they come. And sometimes you have to wait for the simple things. Eastern kingbirds, I've heard them. I've never had a picture of them in my yard. And this one came down and decided to eat some Western choke cherries in front of me. And that was, absolutely worth the wait. They really are so much bigger the closer you get to them, just so you know. Like, it's funny, one of those size things, and I've seen them lots, like out on, gravel roads and whatever. But when you're actually like quite close to them, you're like, oh, that's a fairly large bird. Um, there's a lot to be learned. When you build habitat and you get to observe birds, um, you learn something new. So, like, you'll observe something and you'll be like, well, I don't really understand that. I've never heard of that. So then you look it up and you learn more. And then now all of a sudden, you've kind of like leveled up your knowledge pack. So, a few years ago, it happened for the first time that an American redstart showed up in his juvenile plumage and went through his whole molt process in my yard and left as an adult looking male. And so this has also happened with Wilson's warbler, and this year it was black and white warbler, which is kind of funny because like black and white warblers, there's they're still black and white. So it's kind of like, oh, that was a big change, but he looks a lot fresher than he did once he started molting. So I saw this black and white warbler every day for 38 days. So black and white warblers are hard to get a look at in the first place. So being able to watch one for so long and just, breathe in all of its habits and its quirks and all the little things it does is like a real treat. But the thing out of this is like, I had no idea that warblers could show up in juvenile plumage, molt here, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I'm going back fall as a adult male. Like, sure, I'd never heard of it. September, I mean, we're getting to the end of the season. I don't often get pileated woodpeckers. Some of you might get pileated woodpeckers all the time, but for me, it's a real treat. This fine lady showed up and absolutely obliterated one of my snags. I had a swamp sparrow come through. I only started getting them in 2023, had them in 2024. This year I didn't get a picture. So this is another screenshot from a pond camera. So you know what? It doesn't always work out, but I'm just glad that it kept coming back. So I just have to like look around my camera because it's blocking. Oh yes, it was 33 species on September 3rd. That was a banger of a day. So, some days are slow in my yard and then some days are off the hook like that. So 33 species, and that includes like all my locals and everything like that too. September is when I do sometimes get them in the spring, get fox sparrows. And usually it's pretty brief. And so kind of like, I don't want to say on schedule, but September, this fox sparrow showed up, this red one on the left. That's the typical subspecies that we would have here. And then a few days after that, this handsome fella showed up, or female, I don't know. And you can see by the eBird map on the side that the only other sightings of sooty fox sparrows were down by Calgary. So this was like quite a surprising little visit. And how handsome is it? But the reason I knew what this was because of course I've seen these in BC. And it's a really interesting exercise to see how birds look different in different places. Look up what a song sparrow looks like in BC compared to here. They're a lot darker. So when you kind of broaden your horizons, when you do get that crazy thing that drops in your yard, you kind of have this like data bank to draw from. We've got still some cold weather ahead of us. It might be a nice little thing to do to spend some time while you're indoors. October and November, this is when I usually see my American tree sparrows. The sharp-shinned hawk, it had been around, but this was the first time I got really a good look at it. Towns in Solitaire I'd only had for the first time in 2024, so I was quite excited that one did come back. I have been having pine grosbeaks for the last few years, but this was the first time I'd had an adult male, so that was really exciting. Now, evening grosbeak, this is one that I really, really wanted, and this is where my yard can be a little bit tricky. I'm sitting in my chair, evening grosbeak starts singing. And I mean, I hope for these kinds of things. So I start recording, and then this is where I have a choice. I'm in a blind on my deck. And when people come and sit with me, they also sit in blinds, including my husband and children. They're totally okay with it. Not all the time, but when it's like, those hardcore birding days, if you want to come sit, you're going to be in a blind with me. So I'm in a blind, I'm sitting there, and here's the choice. Do I get up and walk to the middle of the yard to see which tree it's singing from the top of because I can't see the tops? Or do I sit and wait and cross my fingers and hope it comes down? Usually they come down. So it really has paid off for me to sit on my hands and wait. Sorry, sit on my hands and wait and hope that one does come down. It did not. So I only have the lovely recordings, but I have to always remember that something like, say, pine grosbeak, the first time I ever heard one was on my birthday one year, and I only heard it in one time that entire year. The next year, I heard it a couple of times. The next year, I finally saw it. It starts somewhere. So I can't be too disappointed that I've started the process that I heard it. Like it has to start somewhere, right? So species 111. I do have to tell you about an experiment that I did, though, in case you had ever thought about this experiment. I do like to try things because when people ask me about something, I like to have personal experience. I don't like to ever give like advice about something like I haven't done or, personally. So I'd heard quite a bit about shibunkin, which are a kind of Japanese goldfish. And I heard that they were great for eating mosquito larvae and that they eat algae, like in your water features in your ponds. And so in the spring, I decided I was going to try and get some shibunkin and I was going to put them in Marcia because that wasn't really like, like the bird spot. And so I got these 5 shibunkin and I put them in Marcia and everyone in our house was so excited. And, our new favorite word was shibunkin. And so I put them in and did not see them again. And a week went by, and I was pretty sure that they had died. And not a trace, nothing. I made like lots of hiding spots, like for fish and insects. I didn't think it would work so well. 2 weeks goes by, and now I'm like 100% sure that they are dead. And 3 weeks goes by. I'm not thinking about them anymore because I really am convinced that they're dead. A month later, I happened to be walking by Marcia and there was shibunkins swimming around. And that was just absolutely insane. And they had a great season. Did they ever eat the algae? Yeah, and I'm assuming they ate mosquito larvae. They were phenomenal. And so later in the season, I got 3 more and I put them in the pond. And there's a lot of plants, so like a lot of coverage. So like you catch a glimpse of them, but you don't really see them. They're just there doing their thing. And then I kind of in my head thought that the best case scenario would be for my first ever great blue heron to show up and eat them, so I didn't have to worry about them in the fall. That didn't happen. And so in the fall, I started kind of having to think, what am I going to do with these shibunkin? And I didn't really have much of a plan. And then I kind of told myself, I'm like, it's fine. They'll die. They had a good life. I mean, they lived in this great place, and I'm sure they had fun. And and then so I kind of accepted that they were just going to die out there. But then the weather actually started to get colder and things started to freeze up a bit. And then all of a sudden, my heart, I thought, no, I love the shibunkin. These are the best things ever. And so I did some dramatic rescue. I managed to catch 6. They were really hard to catch. But I managed to catch 6. And I was going to put them in the garage. And then my husband's like, well, what about the aeration? Even if you can keep the water thawed. I'm like, what about the aeration? And then I realized one of my container ponds, I leave going with a bubbler and a de-icer pretty late into the season, but I had no intention of year round, but this was my best case scenario. So I got these 6 shibunkin and I put them all into this container pond and I never saw them again. until December when it got a little warm. And all of a sudden, there were shabunkins swimming around again, all six of them. So, this is where we remind ourselves that this is exactly why we never release pet goldfish or any other kind of fish into our Alberta waterways, because they absolutely can survive. These things are tougher than nails and they will be invasive. So, if you are thinking of this, you do have to be prepared to overwinter them, give them away to someone's aquarium, or let them die. That is the reality. And so, will they survive all winter? I have no idea. If they do, I'm going to put them back in the marsh. And then I guess tune in again next year to see what happens in 2026, because I have no idea. So right now, I'm just surprised that when I go by this container pond, there's the fish swimming around. It's the craziest thing. Like sometimes I'll get bird bath cameras and they'll be swimming around in the background. They're quite bright orange. You can't really miss them. And we're almost getting to the end of the year, November 3rd, -3 degrees. And my latest warbler, I usually keep track of like what my latest warbler would be. Usually it's like October or something. And a couple of times it's been Wilson's warbler. One time it was orange crowned warbler. And so to find out like what is my latest warbler of the year going to be. Okay, I did not expect this. So I had very last minute decided that this was the perfect place to do another little miniature in-ground pond. So I had only put this together about a week and a half to 2 weeks before, and I scrounged a couple of plants that I had in another container pond that was quite full. I just did the best with what I could. As you can see, I haven't had time to gussy it up around. It looks pretty shoddy around the outside. But I couldn't believe that this northern water thrush showed up out of the blue like that. And so I put this on the internet thinking, oh, hey, latest warbler ever. And a couple people started pointing out, are you sure that's a northern water thrush? So some people think that this might actually be the first Alberta record of Louisiana water thrush. So there's people looking at this. I don't know. If it's northern water thrush, I'm still happy. I mean, this record for latest warbler is going to be pretty hard to beat. But I mean, maybe it's actually something else. And northern water thrush and Louisiana water thrush look basically identical. You would need someone, not me, to be able to confirm whether it is or not. Will they even be able to confirm from a video? I don't know. So, but we're still waiting. We're still seeing. It's very exciting either way. Finally, finally, a northern saw-whet owl let me take its picture again. So the last picture I had of a northern saw-whet owl was in 2022 in my yard, even though they had been around all the time. So I went out to put some food after dark in the flying squirrel feeder, and it flew past my face and then came around and flew back again. So in I went and I got my camera and I was able to get a picture. And then about a week later, another one showed up, and comparing the pictures, like clearly different birds, different markings. And so I was like, wow, what a way for me to end off the year. And it really is that much sweeter when you do have to wait. And also when it kind of catches you by surprise, it just makes like the whole experience so memorable. And aren't they so cute? Oh, they're so tiny, like they're so small. Like you just can't even picture how small they are. But you know, that was like the icing on the cake for me to finish off the year. So what do the stats look like? 83 species in 2025, unless it's a Louisiana water thrush, and then it will be 84, which is the same as 2024. I was able to add 4 species to my all-time yard list. I added 2 water areas and I took one out. I added 7 shrubs to make up for this mountain ash issue. I added 3 trees, and like I can't even tell you, I buy native perennials like like honestly, I use it like Kleenex. Like I just put them everywhere. I just all of a sudden randomly, oh, I want that, and then so I go and grab them. I could not tell you what is planted in most of the places in my yard. There's so much stuff, but there's so many that I added, and I never regret adding any of them. So what does that mean for 2026? So I've got some shrubs that are kind of like along a fence line, and I'm thinking that they would actually do a better job as trees. So I don't know what those 3 trees are going to be yet. I'm still a little bit undecided, but that's going to be on my list first thing in the spring. I'm going to add a medium-sized tree, like, well, that will grow to a medium size because my neighbors did take out that mountain ash. And so that was like a lot of berries lost. It was also a lot of privacy for our yard loss. So I'm going to be adding a tree on my side. And I really wanted to do this project in 2025 and I didn't get to it, but I want to take out a small lawn section and I want to plant some native clump grasses like super tight together to see if I can kind of form a bit of a turf. And so my front lawn, it's quite shaded. So I'm going to be probably starting with something like a Springle sedge or something like that. Not necessarily a grass, more like a sedge that can handle a little bit more shade. So I'm going to see with a small section to see how that's going to go because of course it's expensive to do something like that. So I'm going to start small and see how it goes. Every year, my list changes. Some birds come, some birds don't. But when a bird comes more than twice, I'm kind of expecting them at some point to come back. Gray catbird was a no-show in 2025. Chestnut-sided warbler was a no-show. Olive-sided flycatcher, which I kind of always expect, was a no-show in 2025. And they always come really like at the same periods of time too. So that was like I mean it's disappointing, but then I'm also like brown thrasher. Like, like how upset can I be? And so you just have to accept that the numbers are going to go up and down. The species are going to change. Some of your favorites might not be there, but something new might pop up. So you got to go in with open mind and open eyes. So when my book came out in April, it was so much better received than I ever thought possible. So far, it's been 9 weeks on the Edmonton bestseller list. And I'm getting some really great feedback from people who started to implement things right away because it came out in the spring. And I love getting messages from people, telling me about the things that have happened since they started adding more habitat areas in their yard. And so I'm hoping that I've created this book that really anyone in an urban area, I mean, it's meant for urban, but if you're outside the city, like you've already got it easy. This is just going to make it better. But really, for people in the city who want that piece of nature at their fingertips, like I have. And so you can see where it's available. If you're not in Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, you can get it from me online at melissalovesbirds.ca. And yeah, and if you want to see more videos of bird nest boxes and bird baths and pictures that I take in my yard, I am on Instagram. You can follow me at habitat_YEG. And I did start a Facebook account about a month ago and I made a complete mess of it so much that they banned my account after a few days because I think I was trying to change too many things. But I don't know why I chose this name, but I can't change it for 60 days apparently. So currently it is Habitat YEG Melissa Penney, which is like the weirdest thing. I don't know. But it's there. And so everything I put on Instagram, if you don't have Instagram, does end up like exactly the same on Facebook. So you're not missing out on one or the other. And that was my year, the ups and downs, the exciting bits. And I would love to answer questions if anyone has any.